Unknown, the surrender experiment. My journey into life's perfection. 1. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. My given name is Michael Allen Singer. From as far back as I can remember, everyone has called me Mickey. I was born May 6, 1947, and lived a fairly ordinary life until the winter of 1970. Then something happened to me that was so profound that it forever changed the direction of my life. Changing events can be very dramatic and, by their very nature, disruptive. Your whole being is headed in one direction, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And that direction has all the momentum of your past and all the dreams of your future. Then suddenly there's a major earthquake, a terrible sickness, or a chance encounter that totally sweeps you off your feet. If the event is powerful enough to change the focus of your heart and mind, the rest of your life will change in due course. You are literally not the same person on both sides of a truly life-changing event. Your interests change, your goals change, in fact. The underlying purpose of your life changes. It usually takes a very powerful event to turn your head around so far that you never look back. But not always. In the winter of 1970, no such event happened to me. What happened was so subtle, so faint, that it could easily have passed by without being noticed. It was not with a shout, but with a whisper that my life was thrown into utter turmoil and transformation. It has been more than 40 years now since that life-changing moment, but I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was sitting on the living room couch in my home in Gainesville, Florida. I was 22 years old and married at the time to a beautiful soul named Shelley. We were both students at the University of Florida, where I was doing my graduate work in economics. I was a very astute student, and I was being groomed by the chairman of the economics department to become a college professor. Shelley had a brother, Ronnie, who was a very successful attorney in Chicago. Ronnie and I became close friends, even though we were from totally different worlds. He was a powerful, wealth-driven, big-city attorney, and I was a 60s-groomed college intellectual hippie. It is worth mentioning just how analytically oriented I was at the time. I had never even taken a philosophy, psychology, or religion course while in college. My electives at school were symbolic logic, advanced calculus, and theoretical statistics. This makes what happened to me all the more amazing. Ronnie would come down once in a while to visit, and we would often just hang out together. As it turns out, Ronnie was sitting on that couch with me on that fateful day in 1970. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but there had been a lull in our leisurely conversation. I noticed I was uncomfortable with the silence and found myself thinking of what to say next. I had been in similar situations many times before, but something was quite different about this experience. Instead of simply being uncomfortable and trying to find something to say, I noticed that I was uncomfortable and trying to find something to say. For the first time in my life, my mind and emotions were something I was watching instead of being. I know that it is difficult to put into words, but there was a complete sense of separation between my anxious mind, which was spewing out possible topics to talk about, and me, the one who was simply aware that my mind was doing this. It was like I was suddenly able to remain above my mind and quietly watch the thoughts being created. Believe it or not, that subtle shift in my seat of awareness became a tornado that rearranged my entire life. For a few moments, I just sat there inwardly watching myself try to fix the awkward silence. But I was not the one trying to fix it. I was the one quietly watching the activity of my mind trying to fix it. At first, there were only a few degrees of separation between me and what I was watching. But every second the separation seemed to become greater and greater. I was not doing anything to cause this shift. I was just there noticing that my sense of me no longer included the neurotic thought patterns that were passing in front of me. This entire process of becoming aware was practically instantaneous. It was like when you stare at one of those posters that has a hidden picture inside. At first, it appears to be just a circle with line patterns. Then, suddenly, you see an entire 3D image emerge from what originally looked like chaos. Once you see it, you can't imagine how you hadn't seen it before. It was right there. Such was the shift that happened inside of me. It was so obvious. I was in there watching my thoughts and emotions. I had always been in there watching, but I had been too unaware to notice. It was as though I had been so involved in their details that I never saw them as just thoughts and emotions. Within seconds, what previously seemed like important solutions for how to break the uncomfortable silence was now sounding like a neurotic voice talking inside my head. I watched as that voice tried out things to say. The weather's been awesome. Hasn't it? Did you hear what Nixon did the other day? Do you want to get something to eat? When I finally did open my mouth to say something, what I said was, "Have you ever noticed that there's this voice talking inside your head?" Ronnie looked at me a little weird, and then a spark lit in his eyes. He said, "Yes, I see what you're talking about. Mine never shuts up." I distinctly remember making a joke out of it by asking him what it would be like if he heard someone else's voice talking in there. We laughed, and life went on. But not my life. My life didn't just go on. In my life, nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't have to try to maintain this awareness. It was who I was now. I was the being who was watching the incessant flow of thoughts pass through the mind from the same seat of awareness. I watched the ever-shifting current of emotions pass through the heart. When I showered, I saw what that voice had to say while I was supposed to be washing my body. If I was talking to someone, I watched as that voice figured out what to say next, instead of listening to what the other person was saying. If I went to class, I watched my mind play the game of trying to think ahead of the professor to see if it could figure out where he was going with the lecture. Needless to say, it did not take long before this newly found voice inside my head really started to annoy me. It was like sitting next to someone in a movie theater who never, ever stops talking. As I observed that voice, something deep inside my being just wanted it to shut up. What would it be like if it stopped? I began to long for silence inside. Within days of that first experience, my life's patterns began to change. When friends came over to socialize, I no longer enjoyed the scene. I wanted to quiet my mind, and social activities didn't help. I began to excuse myself and go out to the woods near our house. I would sit down on the ground amid the trees and tell that voice to shut up. Of course, it didn't work. Nothing seemed to work. I found that I could change the topic it talked about, but I could not get it to just stop talking for any length of time. My yearning for inner silence became a passion. I knew what it was like to watch the voice. What I didn't know is what it would be like if the voice totally stopped, and what I never could have imagined was the life-changing journey on which I was about to embark.